Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, my fine friends. Welcome to episode 6 of the 13th season of the Tom Petty Project podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Brown, and this is the weekly podcast that digs into the entire Tom Petty catalogue, song by song, album by album, and includes conversations with musicians, fans, and people connected with Tom along the way. Before we look at your comments on last week's song, Dreamville, I should go back and talk about the poll results for the first 3 songs on The Last DJ. As usual, I forgot to post the polls on the first 2 songs, so I was playing catch-up. The title track came out overwhelmingly positive, with 54% of you giving The Last DJ a 10 out of 10, as I did, and 46% of you rating it between a 7 and a 9. Money Becomes King was a little more spread, with 28% of you voting the song a 10 out of 10, the 52% majority rating it a 7 to 9, and a surprising 20%, or surprising to me, giving the song a 6 or lower. Last week's song, Dreamville, was your favourite statistically of the 3 tracks so far, with 70% of you rating it a 10 out of 10, 25% of you going with a 7 to 9 score, and a mere 5% of you going with 6 or lower. And remember, if you're rating the song lower in that, 6 or below range, I'd love to hear from you what didn't work. No judgment or complaints from me. I'm just always interested in hearing what it is about different songs that, they don't always connect with people. Is it the lyrics, the melody, the song structure? There can be a whole host of reasons why a song doesn't land with you, so drop me a note if you're in that camp. But let's stick with positivity and see what you had to say about Tom's fond reminiscence, Dreamville. Executive producer Paul Roberts commented, "Excellent pod, Kev." Thanks, Paul, as always. It's my third 10 out of 10 on the run. A great start to an underrated album. And I tend to agree here, Paul. Over the last week, I've been feeling a little rater's remorse with Dreamville. I'm wondering whether I should have gone, with a third straight 10. I think where I ended up going with a 9 on this one was in the musical arrangement, because while it's completely perfect in terms of supporting the feel of the snapshots in time Tom tells us about, there isn't a defining musical moment in it for me. Mike B is with Paul, though, saying 10 out of 10. Most beautiful song on the album, in my opinion. One of Tom's most beautiful and touching songs. And yeah, there are a few songs on this album that fall squarely into that beautiful and touching area, so it has some stiff competition. Nora Hayward-Olsen responded, "Beautiful podcast as always, Kevin." Thanks, Nora. I like the concept that we each have our own Dreamville, a place from childhood where we felt loved, secure, and free. Certain scents, sights, or memories can transport us back to that place and how we felt when we were there. If I was ever going to direct a movie about Tom's life, the opening scene would evoke the lyrics of the song, in the car with his mum on the way to the pool, switching channels on the radio until he landed on one playing an Elvis tune. One of the most sublime tracks on the album, and a nice interlude in what some might consider a more cynical record. So, I know I've yammered on about this ad nauseum on this podcast, but this is where I think Tom's superlative songwriting chops come in, Nora. He has that ability to write such specific lines, but still give us all more than enough canvas to add in our own details, or step back and see a larger picture spread out from the start that he gives us. That idea of a Dreamville being a place in time, or a moment, or a feeling that we can all recall really appeals to me, and especially in an uncertain world, it's a handy emotional refuge to be able to duck into for cover now and again. The brilliant Pete Nestor from the equally brilliant Honest and Unmerciful podcast commented, "Great episode, and thanks for sharing so much about your childhood." Cheers, Pete. Adds a nice richness to the episode and your discussion of the song. Of course this is a Beatles pastiche, but I'm not sure it ever hit me until you mentioned it. What drives it home is how he mentions a blue jay, then the flanged strings from Magical Mystery Tour's Blue Jay Way come into the song. Remember that George Harrison died right about the time these last DJ sessions kicked off. He sings, "I keep waking up alone with a blue jay in my brain." Sounds like this song could be more than just about a loss of adolescence, but also written as a tribute to one of his best friends. And that's such a brilliant catch by Pete that I completely missed. The reference to the Blue Jay absolutely has to be a little deep cut reference to the Magical Mystery Tour. And I also got a little bit sad remembering that George had died so bloody long ago. I'm 52 now, so if I make it another 7 years, I'll have spent longer on the planet than George did. And that just feels wrong somehow. I know that might sound silly, but yeah, anyway. To wrap up Facebook, Richard Gibson writes a long one, but he covers some good points here. He says, "Gonna go 10 out of 10 on this one, as I do wonder if there's anything that could be improved on it at all. And that's a no. It's beautiful escapism. Listening to your great analysis, Kevin, I could have gone 10 out of 10 for Money Becomes King also, as I love the melody, strings, etc. I suppose the only downside to that song was that it was too accurately prophetic. Even all the good guys, Tom included, sometimes had gigs that used golden circles by 2017. This was maybe to make the gigs viable with high staging costs and maybe to keep the general admission tickets affordable, if we're being charitable. But it does date track 2 lyrically as a bit utopian. With the first 3 tracks this strong, there's a real danger this could end up being Tom's best album. And he goes on to say, on the subject of changing individual strings on the guitar, in a gig, it's nice not to have to open a full, and these days sealed, new set to replace one string. So separates are good for this. If the set on the guitar is newish, it would be fine to add one. I'd always change a full set if they were all getting old, though, when I got a chance. If Tom's thinking back to his youth, then it's definitely a case of needs must, with no money to afford a pack. I've knotted strings above the nut or below the bridge when I was a kid to keep going. And I wanted to circle back to something Rich said right at the start there, because it's generally how I tend to grade songs or albums these days. Rather than starting at a 1 and adding points as I go, I tend to start at a 10 and see if there are things that I think could have been improved or changed, etc., according, mostly to my own taste. And Rich is basically right here, isn't he? What would you or could you change in Dreamville to make it any better? Can't really think of anything, so maybe he's right. Maybe I should have gone 10. We'll finish up this week's social media over on Blue Sky with Richard Hearn. And before I read his comment, I'm not sure if I've mentioned on the pod before, but Richard runs a superb website called Paragraph Planet, where every day for the last, I think it's about 478 years now, he's posted a 75-word paragraph from a different contributor. It's a wonderful exercise to go through as a writer to condense your thoughts into a story or a paragraph of 75 words, and Richard's a very generous, supportive dude, so you should all go follow him. Anyway, Richard says it's one of those languid, authentic songs, perhaps more typical on Echo, that Tom does great. And your podcast is great at refocusing on a track. And having listened again, a song that can get squashed on the CD among songs that shout louder, this sounds huge. And I think I commented on an aspect of this that Rich raises, that Dreamville could get, as he says, squashed on the album, but it's the genius of putting it into the 3rd spot, isn't it? It stands out and pops, at least or possibly mainly in part, because it acts as such a gear shift from the 2 songs either side of it, tonally and tempo-wise. So, again, thanks as always for commenting. I love reading your feedback out, and I'll continue to read it on the show. But it's time to get back into the fire and fury of Tom's righteous indignation. Let's get into it. Let's talk about this guy.
Here we meet the villain of the album in this song here.
In his magnum opus 2004 special, Chris Rock examined the difference between being rich and being wealthy by using NBA legend Shaquille O'Neal as an example. He said, Shaq is rich. The white man who signs his check is wealthy. And these are the waters that Tom is splashing around in during the most biting satirical piece of writing we have from his hand. I know heading into this one that Joe isn't a favourite for a few people, and I suspect that it's the abrasive, undiluted disgust Tom has for the antagonist of this song that perhaps puts some people off. But let's see if I can drag you over to my side a little by the end of this episode. So, time to confess, my favourite band of all time is Queen. I grew up listening to Brian, Roger, John and Freddie, and was always absolutely transfixed by songs like March of the Black Queen, The Millionaire Waltz, Seven Seas of Rhye, and of course Bohemian Rhapsody. All Freddie compositions, all daring and eclectic in their own unique ways. But I was also mesmerised by 2 songs that draw strong comparisons to today's track. Flick of the Wrist from the Sheer Heart Sack album, and the opening track to Queen's gigantic Night at the Opera album, Death on Two Legs. They're both ferocious attacks on people who Freddie perceived as having screwed over or mistreated the band. In the former, Freddie opens the song with the venomous lines, "Dislocate your spine if you don't sign," he says, "I'll have you seeing double." While in Death on Two Legs, he levels the following blistering accusation: "A dog with disease, you're the king of the sleaze," at one of Queen's former management team. I remember as a kid being absolutely floored by the power of those lyrics and wondering who they were leveled at. So, when I got to Joe in my discovery of Tom's work, I was both blown away that Tom would write something so direct and delighted at the same time, as it gave me a direct line back to my childhood and a pair of songs that fascinated and drew me as a kid. And there aren't that many straight lines between the Heartbreakers and Queen, but this is definitely one that I can draw. When author Paul Zolo mentions Joe in conversations with Tom Petty, Tom tells him, "Every word of it is true, and the truth hurts sometimes. I saw him also as an impresario. What I was trying to say there was something about pre-packaged pop stars. There's an element of artists out there that doesn't really have much to say about anything. They're just presented as pop stars. I don't mind that, I think that's fine, but I wish they weren't presented as musicians. They're not. They're not musicians, and I think the public is shortchanged by that." Now, I know that any Gen Zs or Gen Zs or millennials listening might be tempted to roll their eyes and utter the very irritating phrase, "Okay, boomer," at this observation from Tom. And look, there are definitely going to be some very talented musicians who also end up being on reality shows like American Idol. In fact, I'll be watching a live stream tomorrow night of one such artist who tried to use Idol to open some doors for her music. But Tom isn't denigrating the entire cohort of people who go through these talent mills. He's speaking in broad terms about the type of artist that the execs who make those shows want to see. Malleable putty that they can shape into whatever fashionable mold will make them the most money in any given era. And I think it's important for me to offer the opinion that even though Tom is commenting here about the artist when he's talking to Paul Zolo, it's more the commercial template that he's commenting on rather than the individual people themselves. And of course, in the song, the blame is all pinned squarely onto the lapel of the big fat cat with a cigar and the line of Mercedes-Benz in his driveway, the eponymous Joe. There's no intro to this song. Tom just comes screaming in, all guns blazing. It's a sonic and tonal punch to the gut that hits so much harder coming off the back of the beautiful, wistful Dreamville. But I was talking about this last week. For me, this is the genius of sequencing this record the way that Tom did. He lays out his thesis in the first two tracks, takes a beat to reminisce about times before everything went to hell, before kicking the door down, stripping back the curtain, and exposing the manipulative wizard for the fraud that he is. "My name's Joe, I'm the CEO. Yeah, I'm the man that makes the big wheels roll." This guy has an ego the size of a small planet. He's brash, arrogant, and as we'll learn as the song goes on, downright despicable. The instrumentation? Well, again, I can see where some people maybe struggle with this song. It's an artillery bombardment of gigantic thudding notes. Bass guitar, distorted lead guitar, piano, and kick drum all thundering that riff, that beat at you, poking you hard in the chest and blowing cigar smoke into your face, demanding your immediate attention. Tom is in full character mode, spitting venom at you as he announces himself as Joe before giving you his raison d'etre. You get to be famous, I get to be rich. The second verse then outlines the business plan. Go get me a kid with a good-looking face. Bring me a kid can remember his place. Some hungry poet son of a bitch. Every line here strips away the cynical, commercial aspect of the business. There's no focus on talent. Just make sure they're good-looking and we'll do as they're told. All the better if they have ambition that we can exploit. Joe's tone then switches to a stomach-turning leer as the music changes. The four-on-the-floor drums give way to a backbeat as the guitars open up and play some light arpeggios. Joe now wants to exploit his favourite target, young women. Bring me a girl, they're always the best. You put them on stage and you have them undress. Some angel whore who can learn a guitar lick. Hey, now that's what I call music. It's uncompromising and savage. It's also jarring language to hear coming from Tom's mouth. And really, we haven't had anything this abrasive and calculated since Stranger in the Night. There's a viciousness to this verse that really takes you aback the first time you hear it. No allegory or allusion, just Tom saying the quiet part out loud. And again, I think it's worth saying that Tom isn't painting all female artists with a broad brush here, and he's not targeting women who own their own sexuality on or off stage. He's making it very clear that it's the exploitation of young women who probably don't have the talent or aren't ready for the spotlight, but have exactly what this CEO needs to make a bundle of money from. They're not being promoted as artists or even individuals, but as a useful, temporary commodity. And one last thing that I doubt is coincidental too is that last line. Now that's what I call music. I'm not sure if that franchise was big in North America, but in the UK, Now That's What I Call Music was a famous compilation album released in, or a double album released in 1983 that basically featured all the big pop hits of the day. The latest release in July of this year was the 125th iteration of the franchise. And the focus again there was on milking fans for absolutely as much money as possible. The music in this third verse is a steadily ascending progression that leads to that last line where the euphoric Joe is in hugely self-congratulatory mood as Mike Campbell comes in with a short but searing guitar fill before we drop right back into the next part of Joe's manifesto. Well, they'll come looking for money when the public gets bored, but we'll fight them with lawyers they could never afford. Yeah, I'll make her look like a spoiled little bitch. She gets to be famous, I get to be rich. And how many artists, big artists, have run up against this? You think of George Michael, Prince, or more recently Taylor Swift. They were all held ransom by mercenary labels or exploitative producers and had to take different types of extreme action to take back artistic control over their own work. Obviously, Tom is another example of this, filing bankruptcy to force the hand of MCA. And this abuse of power and financial pressure goes on all the time in the industry. You get to be famous, they get to be rich. After this verse, we revisit the lechery of Joe wanting a girl brought to him who he can exploit, before exploding into a full 3-bar Mike Campbell guitar solo. And I love Mike's playing in these sections. He's almost leaning into a bit of a pastiche of the hair metal solo, while at the same time still making it tasty and trashy in equal measure. It's great playing, and it really elevates these short turnaround sections. Alrighty, folks, it's time for some petty trivia. Your question from last week was this: which is the first Heartbreaker song, canonically, to feature the word radio? Is it A, Into the Great Wide Open, B, Supernatural Radio, C, Anything That's Rock and Roll, or D, You Don't Know How It Feels? Well, Tom doesn't mention radio in Into the Great Wide Open at all, despite references to A&R men who don't hear a single and, of course, Hollywood. Supernatural Radio, of course, has the word in the title and in the chorus, I can hear you singing on my supernatural radio. You Don't Know How It Feels features the following lines in the first chorus, but let me get to the point. Let's roll another joint and turn the radio loud. But both of these songs come a long time after the first mention of radio in one of Tom's songs, which was, of course, C, Anything That's Rock and Roll, where Tom wails, so come on baby, let's go, don't you hear the rock and roll playing on the radio? Sounds so right. And if radio had given us nothing else other than rock and roll blazing into our living rooms and cars, then it would still have done its job for me. Your question for this week is this: who does Tom say he can hear singing on his supernatural radio in the outro of that song? Is it A, John Lennon, B, Jesus, C, himself, or D, Bill Haley? Okay, back to the song. If you think things have been mean and aggressive to this point, they get downright evil in this last verse. So burned out Johnny thinks the bucks are shifty. What good is that alky to me when he's 50? Well, we could move catalogue if he'd only die quicker. Send my regards to the gig and a case of good liquor. It's cruel, vile, and you know that it happens all the time. And Tom takes this philosophy to an extreme edge of bad taste in having Joe want to kill this aging pop star by fueling his alcoholism, hopefully into an overdose. But he's exposing the cutthroat nature of the business. I mean, really, how many members of NSYNC can you even remember the names of? And how quickly were all of them, other than Justin Timberlake, dropped when their fashionable capital dwindled and their faces couldn't sell merchandise anymore? Most of them went on to jobbing careers as lightweight characters in TV and movies, but only Timberlake managed to rise above the mediocre because he was blessed with talent, charisma, and thankfully for him, a little bit of business savvy. Importantly, he did also retain his looks and always played to his high card, but he's the exception that proves this rule. How many members of New Kids on the Block were writing an album like The Last DJ when they hit their 50s? And how wonderful for Joe would it have been if the members of the Backstreet Boys had died in a plane crash around 2002? They'd have been able to spin out tribute compilations and merchandise to milk that cash cow as the embers still smouldered. We're getting dark on the Tom Petty Project. And in that verse, Tom really leans into the character when he delivers the lines, what good is that alky to me when he's 50, and send my regards to the gig and a case of good liquor. It's a Machiavellian turn, every bit as convincing and captivating as Hopper's Frank Booth in Blue Velvet. This Jabba the Hutt crossed with Gordon Gekko. It's not just the putrid greed, but the sadistic pleasure that Joe takes in his depravity. He doesn't care at all about art, only about product, only moving catalogue. He doesn't care about the artist one jot, only about how much money they can make for him. And we asked a couple of episodes ago, how much money do you need? But if you zoom back away from the very specific portrait that Tom's painting here, it's also as good a critique of capitalism as you'll find in a 3.25 minute album track. You can see why people in the industry wouldn't have liked this, and it's a testament to the relationship that Tom had with the folks at Warner Brothers that this ever saw the light of day on a major label. Tom tells Paul Zolo, "I think there's a lot of talent out there that maybe because they don't fit a certain marketable slot, they're just overlooked. I don't think things were always like that, but marketing has become more important than product, I think. It seems that way to me. And that's what I was trying to say in that song. I wasn't trying to sing about any actual living person. I wouldn't do that. But I just thought it said something about how cold it's become. And if I'm perceived as being bitter, so be it." So is Tom being heavy-handed with his criticism of CEOs and the way the music business operates? Well, I guess that depends on your views on capitalism and the commodification of music and, more widely, art in general. When you justify every decision based on whether it's profitable and not whether it's interesting artistically, then you head further and further towards the safe, homogenized, repetitive, bland type of sound that modern pop music has become. Plenty of kids with good-looking faces, plenty of them have learned a guitar lick or two, and plenty of them haven't even made it to 50 before they've been consigned mercilessly to the scrap heap by one Joe or another. Okay, Pettyheads, that's it for this week. This is top tier songwriting for me. When you have a platform and you can take a risk by punching up at people who have power and deserve it, I think it's good to do that now and again. If you can take that polemic and wrap it in a powerful, simple stomping track like Joe, then I'm all in. There's a theatrical element to the song that you could easily imagine fitting in a full Broadway production. You could see the lights strobe out on those relentless kicks while Joe, with crooked yellowing teeth and a Fagin-esque grotesqueness, is lit from beneath in red as he slobbers and snarls his way through his commercial wet dream. Joe isn't just a great track, it's one of those songs that glues this entire album together. With no villains, there can be no heroes, and we will get a hero late in the piece, so Joe is the essential leviathan lurking in the shadows of this story. It's dark, it's diabolical, it's direct, and it's a 10 out of 10 for me, and I won't even go a half point lower. The Tom Petty Project is a proud member of the Boneless Podcasting Network, which is a loose collective of podcasting friends and acquaintances brought together and championed by the inimitable Chaz Charles. Go check out the roster by clicking on a link in the episode notes, and you can also check out the podcast, also in the network, Seaside Pod Review, a Queen podcast that I co-host with my best good pal, Randy Woods, and also the Ultimate Catalog Clash that I co-host with my other great pal, Corey Morissette. We are currently breaking down the Black Crowes, and this week we published our episode on Side A of the Southern Harmony and Musical Companion. So if you like the Crows, go check that one out. Don't forget to follow me on Facebook, Instagram, Threads, and YouTube at The Tom Petty Project, and on Blue Sky at Tom Petty Project. Go follow, like, go subscribe, do all those types of things, and please leave a review or a rating if you haven't done that already. Keep talking to me on social media, and I'll keep reading out your comments on the show. As your weekly reminder, the Tom Petty Project is not affiliated with the Tom Petty Estate in any way, so when you're looking for Tom's music, go to a local independent record seller. Don't give your money to Joe. Go to an independent record seller and grab some actual physical media, or I suppose you're still giving some of it to Joe, but give some to your local business. If you're looking for official merchandise, go to store.tompetty.com. And if you're looking for merch for this show, please go to store.tompettyproject.com. Don't forget to check out the Tom Petty Nation and Tom Petty Fans Forever groups on Facebook. Make sure you check out Tom Petty Radio on Channel 31 on Sirius XM. Until we meet again next week, keep listening to and sharing Tom's music. Try to be kind. Try to say I love you to someone at least once a day. Stay safe and healthy, and I'll be back with you next week when we'll get real heavy. When a kid goes bad. Bye-bye.